Hello, my name is Pastor Kris Kollar. I'm the pastor of Pleasant Valley Lutheran Church near Malabar Farm and St. Paul Lutheran Church in Lucas, Ohio. Greetings. We're reading through the Bible with commentary. We are up to 1 Samuel chapter 17, actually one of the more famous passages in the Bible in terms of our famous stories. I don't know that people ever actually read the full passage, which is actually quite interesting, but we're up to David and Goliath. So we are in with Samuel. It's actually 1st and 2nd Samuel, but it's one big book originally. And Samuel is the last of the judges, and he ushers in the monarchy with King Saul, who is very tall and good looking and not a very good king. He but you can't blame the poor guy. He's the one establishing kingdom and monarchy in Israel, and that's always going to go badly to begin with. But he's much more worried about what the people think of him than what God thinks of him, and it shows. And so in our last session, he was told, you are not going to be king anymore. And he lost the Spirit of God left him and started settling on David. And so they actually brought David in to play the liar for him whenever an evil spirit would come after him. So he became basically a mentor to David. And in the passage today, you'll hear where basically he does not seem to know David. So one of my footnotes that implies that Saul's mental stability is going, he's either got dementia or something that he can't even remember that he knows David from earlier. That's one possibility. Another possibility is that it's from different traditions and different sources. So you hear a story about a person, you hear another story about a person. What is the order and when do they happen and how do they fit together? They might not fit together perfectly. So for whatever reason, when we hear Saul will not know who David is, although they had spent time together previously, according to what we read in our previous session. So chapter 17. Now the Philistines gathered their armies for battle. They were gathered at Soko, which belongs to Judah, and encamped between Soko and Azekah in Ephes-dammim. Saul and the Israelites gathered and encamped in the valley of Elah and formed ranks against the Philistines. The Philistines stood on the mountain on the one side, and Israel stood on the mountain on the other side, with the valley between them. And there came out from the camp of the Philistines a champion named Goliath of Gath, whose height was 6 cubits and a span. How tall is that? 9 or 10 feet tall, probably. He had a helmet of bronze on his head, and he was armed with a coat of mail. The weight of the coat was 5,000 shekels of bronze. He had greaves of bronze on his legs. That's a piece of armor that protects your shin and your leg. And a javelin of bronze slung between his shoulders. The shaft of his spear was like a weaver's beam, so a beam that you would use to pull against your cloth to pack it in is called a weaver's beam, and it's not small. It's got to be big enough to whack the fibers of the cloth together. And his spear's head weighed 600 shekels of iron, and his shield bearer went before him. He stood and shouted to the ranks of Israel, "Why have you come out to draw up for battle? Am I not a Philistine, and are you not servants of Saul? Choose a man for yourselves, and let him come down to me. If he's able to fight with me and kill me, then we will be your servants. But if I prevail against him and kill him, then you shall be our servants and serve us." And the Philistine said, "Today I defy the ranks of Israel. Give me a man that we may fight together." When Saul and all Israel heard these words of the Philistine, they were dismayed and greatly afraid. So very large person. I don't know exactly how tall, but clearly he's big. Very, very big. And is offering, come out, one person, 1-to-1 battle, come fight against me. Verse 12. Now David was the son of an Ephrathite of Benjamin and Judah named Jesse, who had 8 sons. In the days of Saul, the man was already old and advanced in years. The 3 eldest sons of Jesse had followed Saul to the battle, and the names of his 3 sons who went to the battle were Eliab the firstborn, and next to him Abinadab, and the third Shammah. David was the youngest. The 3 eldest followed Saul, but David went back and forth from Saul to feed his father's sheep at Bethlehem. For 40 days the Philistine came forward and took his stand morning and evening. Verse 17, Jesse said to his son David, "Take for your brothers an ephah of this parched grain and these 10 loaves, and carry them quickly to the camp to your brothers. Also take these 10 cheeses to their commander of their 1,000. See how your brothers fare, and bring some token from them." Now Saul and they and all the men of Israel were in the valley of Elah, fighting with the Philistines. Well, it sounds like they're not really fighting, they're having a big standoff, but they're in that valley. David rose early in the morning, left the sheep with the keeper, took the provisions, and went as Jesse had commanded him. He came to the encampment as the army was going forth to the battle line, shouting the war cry. Israel and the Philistines drew up for battle, army against army. David left the things in charge of the keeper of the baggage, ran to the ranks, and went and greeted his brothers. As he talked with them, the champion, the Philistine of Gath, Goliath by name, came up out of the ranks of the Philistines and spoke the same words as before, and David heard him. Verse 24, All the Israelites, when they saw the man, fled from him and were very much afraid. The Israelites said, "Have you seen this man who has come up? Surely he has come up to defy Israel. The king will greatly enrich the man who kills him, and will give him his daughter and make his family free in Israel." Because if you have a king, you have to pay money and things to the king. But if you defeat this man, then you don't owe the king anything. David said to the men who stood by him, "What shall be done for the man who kills this Philistine, and who takes away the reproach from Israel? For who is this uncircumcised Philistine, that he should defy the armies of the living God?" The people answered him in the same way, "So shall it be done for the man who kills him." Verse 28, his brother Eliab heard him talking to the men, and Eliab's anger was kindled against David. He said, "Why have you come down? With whom have you left those few sheep in the wilderness? I know your presumption and the evil of your heart, for you've come down just to see the battle." David said, "What have I done now? It was only a question." Like, does this not sound like a couple of brothers? It's like, yeah, just asking. Where have I lost? Verse 30, he turned away from him toward another and spoke in the same way, and the people answered him again as before. So he's asking around, what happens if somebody were to defeat this guy? What do they get? And every time he asks somebody, he's getting the same answer, that there will be a lot of reward and it will be good. Verse 31, when the words that David spoke were heard, and that would be the one that is saying that he should not, I think it's the word, where are the words? Who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God? So that was what he's been saying. When the words that David spoke were heard, they repeated them before Saul, and he sent for him. David said to Saul, "Let no one's heart fail because of him. Your servant will go and fight with this Philistine." Saul said to David, "You're not able to go against this Philistine to fight with him, for you're just a boy. He's been a warrior from his youth." But David said to Saul, "Your servant used to keep sheep for his father, and whenever a lion or a bear came, he took a lamb from the flock. I went after it, struck it down, rescuing the lamb from its mouth, and if it turned against me, I would catch it by the jaw, strike it down, and kill it. Your servant has killed both lions and bears, and this uncircumcised Philistine shall be like one of them, since he has defied the armies of the living God." It's like, yeah, I used to watch sheep. That means I attacked lions and bears, and no problem. I can get this guy. David said, "The Lord, who saved me from the paw of the lion and from the paw of the bear, will save me from the hand of this Philistine." So Saul said to David, "Go, and may the Lord be with you." Verse 38, Saul clothed David with his armor, because this is at a time when hardly anybody has any armor or sword or anything iron, because the Philistines are well equipped, but the Israelites are not. So he gives him his own armor. He put a bronze helmet on his head and clothed him with a coat of mail. David strapped Saul's sword over the armor, and he tried in vain to walk, for he was not used to them. Then David said to Saul, I can't walk with these, I'm not used to them. So David removed them. Then he took the staff in his hand and chose 5 smooth stones from the wadi and put them in his shepherd's bag in the pouch. His sling was in his hand, and he drew near the Philistine. And as I'm reading through this, I'm like, there's nothing here that says that Saul doesn't recognize David. He just talks to him and says, he just says, your servant, and here I am. It's the king. There's a lot of people around. There's no reason why they should be like, oh, David. And also, some people say, well, this means David was short. Not necessarily. If you remember that Saul was very tall. He was head and shoulders above everybody else. So Saul's armor would have been quite large because he was quite tall. And plus, David's used to running around with the sheep. And then a third comment, in the book by Malcolm Gladwell named David and Goliath, he talks about sometimes being big looks impressive, but being small has actually got its own set of advantages. And sometimes there's all kinds of advantages that we don't recognize. And in the case of a sling, they're like shooting somebody with a rifle. They're a tactical weapon that you could, if somebody was practiced and good, it would literally could sling a rock, and it was like shooting them with the rock, like it was that deadly. Where Goliath is large and slow and can probably not see very well. It's a very interesting book by Malcolm Gladwell. So, some interesting things to consider. Verse 41, the Philistine came on and drew near to David with his shield bearer in front of him. When the Philistine looked and saw David, he disdained him, for he was only a youth, ruddy and handsome in appearance. So he's obviously not wearing armor, and he's not another, huge, tall, big warrior. He's just David. The Philistine said to David, am I a dog that you come to me with sticks? And the Philistine cursed David by his gods. The Philistine said to David, come to me, and I'll give you your flesh to the birds of the air and to the wild animals of the field. Verse 45, but David said to the Philistine, you come to me with sword and spear and javelin, but I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. This very day the Lord will deliver you into my hand, and I will strike you down and cut off your head. And I will give the dead bodies of the Philistine army this very day to the birds of the air and to the wild animals of the earth, so that all the earth may know that there is a God in Israel, and that all this assembly may know that the Lord does not save by sword and spear, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give you into our hand. So wonderful trash talk between the two of them. You're just, am I a dog? You're coming at me with a stick? I said, yeah, you're going down because of the Lord. Verse 48. When the Philistine drew nearer to meet David, David ran quickly toward the battle line to meet the Philistine. David put his hand in his bag, took out a stone, slung it, and struck the Philistine on his forehead. The stone sank into his forehead, and he fell face down on the ground. The stone sank into his forehead. Like I said, hitting somebody with a sling was like shooting somebody with a gun. It's that deadly. So the stone literally goes into his head, knocks him down onto the ground before he even gets close enough to try to reach David. Verse 50. So David prevailed over the Philistine with a sling and a stone, striking down the Philistine and killing him. There was no sword in David's hand. Then David ran and stood over the Philistine. He grasped his sword, drew it out of its sheath, and killed him. Then he cut off his head with it. So either the stone killed him or the sword killed him, but definitely cutting off his head. He's now definitely dead. And when we tell this story to Sunday school, I don't know that we always include the details about he went and cut his head off. When the Philistine saw that their champion was dead, they fled. The troops of Israel and Judah rose up with a shout and pursued the Philistine as far as Gath and the gates of Ekron, so that the wounded Philistines fell on the way to Shaaraim as far as Gath and Ekron. The Israelites came back from chasing the Philistines, and they plundered their camp. So they all ran away, and they either killed them or at least chased them off, and then they got to keep whatever was left behind. So all the food, all the animals, all the weapons that they left them behind, everything that you can grab is now yours. Verse 54, David took the head of the Philistine and brought it to Jerusalem, but he put his armor in his tent. What armor? He doesn't have armor. At least he doesn't have regular, like armor. And at this point, Jerusalem doesn't exist. So this is a story being told sometime later, but clearly at some point the head of Goliath was taken to what became Jerusalem, and it was kept there. Verse 55, when Saul saw David go out against the Philistine, he said to Abner, the commander of the army, Abner, whose son is this young man? Abner said, As your soul lives, O king, I do not know. The king said, Inquire whose son the stripling is. On David's return from killing the Philistine, Abner took him and brought him before Saul with the head of the Philistine in his hand, which I just, clearly he's a young man, but he just killed this massive person, and what's the best thing to do is carry the head around and show it to everybody. And I just love, I'm like, why don't we show this picture of him going and talking to Saul with Goliath's head hanging from the hair? Saul said to him, Whose son are you, young man? And David answered, I am the son of your servant Jesse, the Bethlehemite. So here's where Saul does not know David. Did the playing the liar happen after, and the order of the story got messed up? Is Saul's brain starting to go? Is he got some dementia? Was he playing the liar earlier, but Saul never actually talked to him back then? He just hung out? We don't know. It's just an interesting detail that for some reason he needs to find out who David. And the other possibility is maybe David had played the liar earlier, and then a period of time had gone by, and now we're seeing he doesn't recognize him. I like to think that the liar happened later, but hard to say. And this, like I said, the book by Malcolm Gladwell about David and Goliath makes some very interesting points that sometimes, especially in our society, we think, oh, big is good, but big is slow, and small is nimble and quick and flexible and can do all kinds of things. So the reality is big has advantages, little has advantages, where you are has advantages. And it's very nice, since both of my churches are little churches, but both of my churches are they're wonderful. They're this family of people that serve God, and that don't have to be big to be doing God's work and to be walking in God's will. So we need to remember that it isn't always bigger is not always better. Sometimes there are lots of advantages to people that are not as big. So, and to be willing to go and do whatever God calls you to do, even if it's facing somebody really big. So now may the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face shine upon you and be gracious unto you. May the Lord look at you with favor and give you peace. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Go in peace. Like, subscribe, comment. We'll see you again next time. Thanks for being here.